The starship hummed quietly as Susan Miller stood at the viewport watching the alien world grow larger. Below her heart raced with anticipation and fear as the first human ambassador to the Zintari Collective, a federation of 7 advanced species, who had made contact with Earth only 3 years ago, Commander Vala, a tall purple-skinned humanoid with 4 arms and luminescent eyes, approached her. The Zintari leader moved with fluid grace that made Susan feel clumsy and primitive by comparison. "We arrive at the Council world in 20 minutes. Ambassador Vala said, her voice musical yet somehow mechanical through the translation device. "Are you adequately prepared for the introduction ceremony?" Susan smoothed her uniform and nodded, though her mouth felt dry. "I believe so, Commander. I have studied the protocols extensively." Vala tilted her head in the gesture Susan had learned, indicated mild amusement. "Protocols are merely formalities, Ambassador. The true test will be how you respond when the Council probes your species' worth." That statement did nothing to calm Susan's nerves. Humans had been shocked when the massive Zintari ships appeared in orbit 3 years ago. Even more shocking was learning that hundreds of advanced civilizations existed in the galaxy, forming complex alliances and hierarchies. Earth was like a child suddenly discovering the adult table and being asked to prove they belonged there. The ship descended through iridescent clouds, revealing a city of impossible architecture. Spiraling towers of crystal and metal stretched toward the sky. Gardens floated unsupported between buildings. Transportation tubes crisscrossed like glowing veins, connecting every structure. Susan felt a wave of inadequacy wash over her. What could humanity possibly offer? Beings who had mastered such technology. "We have prepared quarters for you to refresh before the ceremony," said Vala. "Your biological processes appear accelerated. Are you experiencing distress?" Susan realized she was breathing rapidly. "Just nervous," she admitted. "We humans tend to show our emotions physically." Vala blinked her luminous eyes slowly. "Emotional transparency is considered a vulnerability among the Council races. You would be wise to control these displays." The ship docked with a barely perceptible shudder. Susan followed Vala through corridors filled with aliens of various forms. Some appeared nearly human, while others defied description entirely. Many stopped to stare at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to what Susan interpreted as disdain. Her quarters were spacious but designed for beings with different proportions. The bed was too large, the chairs too high, the temperature uncomfortably warm. Susan had 30 minutes to prepare herself to face the Council that would determine whether humanity would be welcomed into galactic society or left isolated on Earth until they evolved further. Susan reviewed her notes one final time. Earth needed this alliance. Pollution, climate change, resource depletion all threatened humanity's future. The Zintari offered solutions, but at a price. They expected Earth to contribute something meaningful to the collective. What that might be, Susan still wasn't certain. A chime indicated her time was up. Vala waited outside. Susan straightened her shoulders and followed the commander through a series of grand halls. Each was filled with representatives from different worlds, all watching her with those same evaluating stares. The Council chamber itself was semicircular with 7 elevated platforms. Each held a different being representing one of the founding species of the collective. In the center stood a simple platform, clearly meant for Susan. Ambassador Susan Miller of Earth, announced an unseen voice. "Please present yourself for evaluation." Susan walked to the central platform, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien eyes. Her mouth went dry as she looked up at the 7 Council members. The tallest was a being of living crystal whose thoughts transmitted directly to her mind. The smallest resembled a jellyfish floating in a special atmosphere tank. Between them sat representatives that ranged from insectoid to vaguely reptilian to nearly human. "We have observed your world for 70 of your years," began the crystalline being, its thoughts resonating painfully in Susan's head. "We find your species paradoxical, capable of both remarkable creativity and self-destructive behavior. Technologically advancing yet socially primitive." Susan fought to keep her expression neutral despite the insult. The jellyfish creature spoke next, its words translated by a small drone hovering nearby. Your world stands at a precipice. Ambassador, your resources dwindle. Your climate destabilizes your nations still war with one another. What can such a species offer the collective? This was the moment Susan had prepared for. Why humanity deserved a place among the stars. Respected council. She began, her voice steadier than she felt. It is true that humanity faces challenges, but it is in facing challenges that we reveal our true nature. We are adaptable, resilient, and determined. When problems seem insurmountable, we find solutions. When resources are scarce, we innovate. A reptilian council member leaned forward. We have reviewed your history. Ambassador, your species has caused the extinction of countless others on your own world. You fight among yourselves over territory, resources, and incomprehensible ideological differences. Why should we believe you would not bring such chaos to the collective? Susan took a deep breath. We have made mistakes, yes, but we learn from them. We evolve not just physically but culturally and ethically. Each generation builds upon the wisdom of the last. Humanity has created art, literature, music that expresses the full spectrum of existence. We have philosophies that question the nature of consciousness itself. We have an unquenchable curiosity that drives us to explore even when exploration is dangerous. The council members exchanged glances. Many species create art. Ambassador said, one who resembled an insect with compound eyes. Few destroy their own habitats in pursuit of temporary comfort. Susan felt her cheeks flush with emotion, which she struggled to control. I cannot defend all of humanity's choices, but I can tell you what makes us worthy of consideration. We refuse to accept impossibility. When told something cannot be done, we find a way. When facing extinction, we fight harder. When knocked down, we rise again. Perhaps other species are stronger, faster, more technologically advanced, but humans persist. We adapt. We survive. A silence fell over the chamber. The council members communicated with each other in ways Susan could not perceive. Finally, the crystalline being spoke again. Your passion is noted, Ambassador. But passion without wisdom is dangerous. Your species remains divided. Your nations compete rather than cooperate. You deplete resources faster than they regenerate. These are not traits we welcome in the collective. Susan's heart sank. The future of Earth depended on this alliance. Without Zintari technology, Earth would continue its slow decline. But before she could respond, a new voice spoke. If I may address the council. Susan turned to see a female Zintari she had not met before. This one had deeper purple skin and eyes that seemed to glow with greater intensity. I am Nira, Chief Xenobiologist of the Exploration Fleet. I have studied Earth for 20 years and wish to offer testimony. The council nodded permission. While the ambassador species does indeed possess the flaws you have identified, they also possess something rare in the galaxy, Nira said, moving to stand beside Susan. They change rapidly, not over millennia but within decades. Their cultural evolution outpaces even their technological advancement. They learn, they grow, and they possess a quality our simulations value highly: empathy. Even for species unlike themselves. Susan looked at Nira with surprise. The alien gave no indication she noticed, continuing her defense. I believe humanity deserves provisional status within the collective. They have much to learn but also much to teach. The council chambers filled with murmurs of discussion, the crystalline being raised, a faceted hand bringing silence. We will consider your testimony, Nira. The ambassador will remain as our guest while we deliberate. Vala will show you to your chambers. Ambassador, we will summon you when we have reached our decision. Susan bowed respectfully, fighting disappointment. It was neither acceptance nor rejection but continued evaluation. She followed Vala from the chamber, uncertain of Earth's fate. As they walked, Vala spoke quietly. The council rarely grants immediate admission. Ambassador, do not interpret this as failure. Susan nodded, grateful for the reassurance. When they reached her quarters, she turned to Vala. Why did Nira speak for humanity? She doesn't know me. Vala hesitated, her luminous eyes studying. Susan, Nira has spent more time observing Earth than any other Zintari. Perhaps she sees potential in your species that even you do not recognize. Rest now. Ambassador tomorrow brings new challenges as the door closed behind Vala. Susan stared out at the alien cityscape, wondering what Naira had seen in humanity that made her risk her standing to defend them, and what tests still awaited before Earth would know its fate. Susan woke to a gentle chiming sound. The alien room gradually illuminated, revealing walls that shifted colors with the changing light outside. She had slept surprisingly well, considering the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. A soft knock at her door preceded Naira, entering, the purple-skinned Zintari xenobiologist who had defended humanity at the council meeting, carried what appeared to be breakfast. "You must maintain optimal biological functions, Ambassador," she said. Placing the tray on a table, "I have selected nutrients compatible with human physiology." Susan smiled, grateful for the consideration. "Thank you, Naira, and thank you for speaking on humanity's behalf." Yesterday I was surprised. Naira settled into a chair, her forearms arranging themselves in a formal posture. "I spoke truth, not favor, Ambassador. I have observed Earth transmissions for many cycles. Your species fascinates me." Susan examined the food. Strange fruits and something resembling porridge. Cautiously, she tasted it, finding the flavors unusual but pleasant. "What about us fascinates you specifically?" Naira tilted her head, her luminous eyes brightening. "Your contradictions. Most species follow predictable evolutionary paths. Strength or intelligence or communal cooperation becomes their defining trait. Humans develop in all directions simultaneously. You create both weapons and art, both poison and medicine. You cooperate yet compete. The Council finds this disturbing. I find it promising." Susan considered this as she had. "Most humans would say those contradictions cause our problems." "Perhaps," replied Naira. "But they also create your solutions. Your adaptability stems from these contradictions. The Council fears what cannot be easily categorized." Chime interrupted their conversation. Vala entered, her posture rigid. "Formal, Ambassador, the Council request your presence for the first trial." "Trial?" Susan set down her food. "I thought they were deliberating." "The deliberation concluded," said Vala. "They have decided you will undergo 3 trials to demonstrate humanity's potential. The first begins now." Susan quickly prepared herself, straightening her uniform and following Vala and Naira through the crystal corridors of the alien citadel. Her mind raced. What kind of trials? Would they test her physically, intellectually? Humans were neither the strongest nor the most intelligent species in the galaxy. They entered a chamber different from the council room. This one was circular with viewing platforms around the perimeter. The 7 council members watched from above while Susan was led to the center where a simple pedestal stood. "Ambassador," began the crystalline council member, "we must evaluate whether humanity possesses qualities beneficial to the collective. The first trial assesses your species' capacity for understanding other minds." The floor around Susan shimmered, then transformed into what appeared to be holographic projections of 7 different environments. Each contained alien beings going about activities Susan could not comprehend. "You will observe 7 species," the crystalline being continued. "All are members of the collective. You must identify which is experiencing conflict and propose a resolution. You have 1 rotation of this world, approximately 30 of your Earth hours." The council members departed, leaving Susan with Naira and Vala. Susan turned to them, puzzled. "Am I supposed to understand alien psychology?" With no background, Vala remained expressionless. "This tests innate ability, not learned knowledge." Naira added, "Humans claim empathy as a strength, Ambassador. Now you must demonstrate it." Susan approached the first holographic environment. It showed beings resembling giant centipedes building intricate structures underground. She watched their movements for any signs of disagreement, but their alien body language meant nothing to her. How could she possibly interpret the emotional state of creatures so different from humans? She moved to the next environment, and the next. Each featured species more alien than the last. Some floated in gas giants. Others existed in what appeared to be magma. Each engaged in activities that made no sense to human perception. Susan felt despair growing. This was impossible. No human could intuitively understand such diverse life forms without context. Naira observed silently while Vala stood at attention by the door. Susan turned to them in frustration. "This isn't fair. I'm being asked to understand species I know nothing about." Naira tilted her head. "Is that not what humans do when they encounter the unfamiliar? Seek to understand." Susan paused, considering the xenobiologist's words. She was right. Throughout human history, people encountered unfamiliar cultures and had to find ways to communicate to understand. Without knowledge of language or customs, they looked for universal signals. Susan returned to the holographic environments with new determination. Instead of trying to comprehend alien culture, she looked for universal patterns of behavior: proximity, repetition, escalation, intensity. In the third environment, featuring crystalline beings similar to the council member, she noticed a pattern. One crystal being was gradually isolated from others. Its color dimmed slightly compared to its companions. When it approached others, they shifted away slightly. "That one," Susan pointed. "It's being excluded from the group." Vala looked surprised. "You identified the conflict?" Susan nodded. In human societies, ostracism is a form of conflict. It doesn't require physical confrontation to cause harm. She continued observing the crystalline beings, noticing how the isolated one attempted to match its frequency to the others, but never quite synchronized. This reminded her of human social dynamics, people trying to fit in, but being rejected for subtle differences. The solution would be to identify why the synchronization fails. Susan said, thinking aloud. If the others could be shown that different frequencies complement rather than disrupt their harmony. Naira made a sound Susan hadn't heard before, something like chiming laughter. "You think like a human ambassador, applying social concepts to beings who communicate through crystalline resonance. Yet your intuition has merit for ours." Susan studied each environment, gradually identifying patterns that might indicate conflict. In one aquatic species, she noticed resource hoarding. In winged beings, she recognized territorial disputes. Each time she proposed solutions based on human conflict resolution strategies adapted to alien biology and society. As the hours passed, Susan grew exhausted but continued her analysis. When the council returned, she had identified what she believed were conflicts in 5 of the 7 environments. The crystalline council member spoke. "Most impressive, Ambassador. Few species correctly identify more than 3 conflicts on their first attempt." Susan felt a surge of hope. Was this success? The insectoid council member clicked its mandibles. "However, your proposed solutions reveal human bias. You assume all species value harmony over hierarchy, individual needs over collective efficiency." Susan felt her confidence waver. "I applied principles that work in human societies." The jellyfish council member rippled. "What works for humans may destabilize other societies. Ambassador, this is the danger your species presents. You reshape environments to suit yourselves rather than adapting to existing conditions." Susan straightened her shoulders, feeling defensive. "We reshape when necessary, but humans are also highly adaptable. We survive in deserts, tundras, mountains, oceans. We modify our behavior for different social contexts. This very conversation demonstrates my attempt to understand perspectives vastly different from my own." The council members exchanged glances, communicating in ways Susan could not perceive. Finally, the crystalline being spoke. "You have demonstrated better than expected observational skills, Ambassador, and AO. Willingness to understand difference. These are valuable traits. The first trial is complete. Rest, then prepare for the second trial, which will test different qualities." Susan bowed respectfully. Though her legs trembled with exhaustion, she maintained her diplomatic composure until the council members departed. Then she nearly collapsed. Naira quickly moved to support her. "You require rest, Ambassador. Your biological systems show strain." Susan allowed herself to be guided back to her quarters. Her mind spun with questions. How had she performed really? What would the next trial demand, and most importantly, was Earth any closer to joining the collective as they walked? Vala spoke unexpectedly. Most species fail the first trial entirely. Ambassador, your performance was exceptional. Susan looked at the commander in surprise. Was that a compliment? Naira added, the council will not admit it, but they are intrigued. Your approach to the conflicts was unique, unpredictable, like humanity itself, in her quarters. Susan sank onto the bed, too tired to remove her uniform. Naira's words echoed in her mind. Unpredictable, like humanity itself. Was that their strength, or what the collective feared most about them? The second trial would come tomorrow. She needed to be ready. But as sleep claimed her, Susan wondered if anyone could truly be ready to represent an entire species among the stars. Susan slept deeply, her human body demanding recovery after the mental strain of the first trial. She woke to find Naira waiting patiently in a corner of the room, the Zintari xenobiologist almost perfectly still in meditation. The second trial begins. In 1 hour, Naira said, opening her luminous eyes. You should prepare. Susan nodded, still groggy. What will they test this time? Naira stood unfolding her forearms from their meditative position. Each trial examines a different aspect of species potential. The first assessed perception and understanding. The second will test adaptation and survival. That sounded more physical than mental. Susan showered quickly in the strange alien facility that used sound vibrations rather than water. She dressed in the adaptive uniform Earth had designed for her mission, thankful for its flexibility. Vala arrived to escort them. The commander seemed more formal than usual, her posture rigid. Ambassador, the second trial occurs in environmental chambers. Unlike the first, this will place you in physical situations. Susan swallowed nervously. Is it dangerous? The council seeks to understand your physical capabilities, not harm you, Vala replied. However, all tests involve some risk. They walked through the citadel, passing aliens of various species who watched Susan with undisguised curiosity. Humans were still novelties in the galactic community. She kept her head high, ignoring the stares. The environmental chamber was a massive dome at least 50 meters. Across, the council members observed from an elevated platform. Their expressions remained unreadable to Susan, though she was beginning to recognize subtle changes in posture and color that might indicate interest or concern. The crystalline council member addressed her ambassador. The collective spans worlds with environments vastly different from Earth. Members must function across these environments or provide unique adaptation technologies. Today we assess human environmental adaptability. Susan nodded, understanding. This was a physical test, not just an intellectual one. You will experience 5 environments common among collective worlds, the council member continued. Each presents challenges for your biology. You may exit any environment. If you find it unbearable, simply state your withdrawal. In other words, Susan thought they wanted to see how much humans could endure before giving up. The floor beneath her feet shimmered and transformed. The air suddenly became hot and heavy with moisture. Gravity increased slightly. Susan found herself standing in a swampy environment with alien vegetation rising high above her head. The humidity made breathing difficult and sweat immediately beaded on her skin. A voice instructed cross the swamp to reach the marker. Susan peered through the mist, seeing a faint glowing point in the distance. She began walking carefully, testing each step in the unfamiliar terrain. The mud pulled at her boots, threatening to trap her. The increased gravity made each movement require extra effort. Something moved in the murky water to her right. Susan froze, training from Earth survival courses, taking over large predator potentially, or just curious local fauna. She had no way to know. The vegetation provided possible paths overhead. Susan noticed strong vines stretched between the massive plants. She tested one, finding it held her weight. Using the vines, she pulled herself above the swamp water, progressing through the environment more quickly. From the observation platform, Naira turned to Vala. She adapts quickly. Vala nodded. Humans evolved as climbers. Their appendages retain surprising versatility. Susan reached the marker in less time than the council had anticipated. The environment shimmered again, transforming around her. The humid heat vanished, replaced by biting cold. The gravity decreased substantially, making her movements bouncy and unpredictable. An ice-whirled jagged crystals rose from the ground, reflecting light in blinding patterns. The air was thin, making each breath painful. Susan immediately hugged herself against the cold. Her uniform adjusted somewhat but could not fully compensate for the extreme temperature. Navigate the crystal field to the shelter, the voice instructed. Susan could see a structure in the distance, but the decreased gravity and slippery surface made walking treacherous. She fell several times, sliding across the ice. The cold penetrated quickly, making her fingers and face numb. She analyzed the problem, too. Much friction walking normally, too little surface contact. The solution came from winter sports on Earth. Susan lowered her center of gravity and began sliding deliberately, using her momentum to glide across the ice, controlling her direction with subtle shifts in weight. Most fascinating, Nira commented to Vala. She repurposes recreational movements for survival. Susan reached the shelter half-frozen but successful. The environment shifted again. 3 more environments tested different extremes. A high-gravity desert with caustic dust storms, a zero-gravity chamber filled with floating toxic spores, a chamber of perpetual darkness with shifting floor geometry. In each environment, Susan found ways to adapt using human ingenuity and physical capabilities. When the final test concluded, she stood before the council exhausted but undefeated. The council members conferred silently. Then the crystalline being spoke. Ambassador, your performance exceeded projections. Human adaptability appears more developed than preliminary studies suggested. Susan managed a tired smile. Despite our physical limitations, we compensate with problem solving. The insectoid council member clicked its mandibles. Yet you required protective covering. Your natural form withstands few extremes. Susan nodded, acknowledging the observation. True. We create technology to overcome our biological limitations. That partnership between our bodies and our innovations defines humanity. The reptilian council member leaned forward. Still, you demonstrate resourcefulness, Ambassador. Many species with superior physical attributes lack such quick adaptation. Susan sensed this might be progress. The council was acknowledging human strengths even while noting limitations. The final trial begins tomorrow, said the crystalline being. It will test different qualities altogether. Rest and recover your biological functions. Susan was escorted back to her quarters, barely able to walk from exhaustion. Nira supported her with 2 of her forearms. You performed admirably. Ambassador, few species complete all 5 environments without withdrawal. Susan collapsed onto her bed, muscles aching. What exactly are they looking for, Nira? To humiliate humanity by showing our weaknesses, or to find our strengths? Nira arranged nutrients and hydration beside Susan's bed. The council seeks understanding, Ambassador. They must know what humans truly offer the collective and what risks you present. Susan took a long drink of the strange but refreshing liquid they provided. So far, I've shown we can understand alien conflicts and survive harsh environments. Is that enough? Nira made a gesture Susan had not seen before, something that seemed contemplative. The collective values, complementary attributes, Ambassador, species that provide unique perspectives or capabilities, strengthen the whole. Susan thought about this. What unique perspective does humanity offer? Nira moved toward the door. Your final trial may answer that question. Rest now, Ambassador. You have impressed many already, including some who expected your failure. After Nira left, Susan lay awake despite her exhaustion. 2 trials completed, 1 remaining. Earth needed this alliance. Their resources dwindling, their climate destabilizing. The Zintari offered solutions that could save millions of lives. Yet Susan sensed the trials were about more than determining if humanity deserved help. They were assessing if humans would be contributors or burdens within the galactic community. Susan drifted to sleep. wondering what final test would determine humanity's fate among the stars. Would the Council recognize whatever unique qualities humans might offer, or would Earth remain isolated, struggling alone with its mounting crises? Morning came too soon. Vala arrived looking more somber than usual. Ambassador, the final trial awaits. The Council has accelerated the process. Susan dressed quickly. Something felt different about Vala's demeanor. Has something happened? Vala hesitated uncharacteristically. The Council received disturbing transmissions from Earth during the night cycle. They believe these may impact your candidacy. Susan's heart sank. What transmissions? Vala would not elaborate. Instead, she led Susan through unfamiliar corridors. Finally, they entered a small chamber unlike the grand spaces of previous trials. This room held only a simple table with what appeared to be an Earth communication device. The crystalline council member waited alone. Ambassador, we have intercepted communications from your planet that concern us. Before proceeding with the final trial, we require explanation. The device activated, showing news footage from Earth. A political leader was giving a speech advocating aggressive expansion of Earth's military capabilities to ensure humans would never be subjugated by alien powers. The rhetoric was fearful, defensive, painting the collective as potential conquerors rather than allies. Susan felt sick watching. The speech represented everything she had tried to counter. In her diplomatic mission, Ambassador, the council member, said we must question whether Earth truly seeks peaceful integration when your leaders prepare for conflict. Susan took a deep breath, facing what might be the true final trial, explaining humanity's deepest flaws and greatest virtues to beings who held her planet's future in their hands. Susan stared at the screen, her mind racing to formulate a response that would salvage the diplomatic mission. The politician continued speaking words that undermined everything she had worked to establish. Respected council member, Susan began choosing her words carefully. That speaker represents one perspective among many on Earth. Unlike the unified governance of collective species, humans maintain multiple nations with different viewpoints, the crystalline being shifted, its facets catching light in new patterns. This division you describe concerns us, Ambassador. If Earth cannot speak with one voice, how can agreements be honored? Susan took a deep breath. We call it democracy. The freedom to express different viewpoints, even ones we disagree with, is central to human society. We believe diversity of thought leads to better decisions over time. This seemed to puzzle the council member. Yet this human speaks of preparing defenses against us, while you speak of alliance. How do we determine Earth's true intention? Before Susan could respond, the door opened and Naira entered. She bowed respectfully to the council member. I request permission to provide context regarding human communication patterns, the crystalline being granted permission. With a gesture, Naira approached the display. Humans communicate through opposition and debate, Ambassador. Their decision-making involves presenting contrasting viewpoints before reaching consensus. This speaker represents security concerns, others advocate cooperation. The process appears chaotic but creates adaptable policies. Susan looked at Naira gratefully. The xenobiologist understood something fundamental about humanity that the council missed. The council member considered this. Earth appears unstable by collective standards. This instability presents risk. Susan saw her opportunity to turn the conversation. In some ways, yes. But that instability also creates our greatest strength. Humans constantly question, explore, and innovate precisely because we are not unified. Our disagreements push us to consider multiple possibilities. Our competing systems generate diverse solutions. When crisis comes, we have alternatives rather than a single point of failure. The crystalline being remained silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its tone had shifted. Ambassador, we find your species perplexing. The final trial will determine if these contradictions offer value to the collective or present unacceptable risk. Vala guided Susan from the room, Naira following behind. When they were alone in the corridor, Susan turned to Naira. Thank you for explaining. I was struggling to defend something so fundamental to human nature. Naira made a gesture with her upper arms that Susan interpreted. As dismissive, I merely provided factual context. Ambassador, the Council requires accurate information to assess your species. They walked silently through the citadel. The atmosphere seemed different today. Aliens of various species watched Susan with new intensity. Some appeared concerned, others curious. Susan wondered what rumors circulated about the human trials. The chamber for the final trial was smaller than previous venues, a simple room with the 7 council members seated in a semicircle. Susan stood before them alone. Neither Vala nor Naira remained at her side. Ambassador Susan Miller of Earth. The jellyfish council member began its translucent body pulsing with light. The previous trials tested your perception, adaptation, and survival capabilities. This final assessment examines something more fundamental, the reptilian member continued. The collective functions through harmony. Ambassador. Each species contributes unique attributes while conforming to shared principles. Your species demonstrates individuality, creativity, and unpredictability, qualities both promising and concerning. Susan waited, unsure what test would measure such abstract qualities. The crystalline being rose. Our final trial is not a test, but a choice, Ambassador. We offer 2 paths for Earth. A holographic display activated showing 2 distinct scenarios. In the first path, Earth receives immediate technological assistance, environmental restoration systems, energy production without pollution, medical advances that would save millions of lives. It showed Earth healing, thriving. But Susan noticed something disturbing in the images. Humans appeared more uniform, less diverse. Their cities, while beautiful, looked standardized. Their cultures blended into a single, global identity. In the second path, Earth received more limited assistance. Technological exchange occurred gradually over decades. The planet recovered slowly with continued struggles. The images showed humans still facing challenges, still divided into nations and cultures. But they also showed continuous innovation, cultural diversity, and humans expanding to other worlds independently. The crystalline being explained. The first path offers immediate solutions to Earth's crises. In exchange, humans will adapt to collective standards. Your governance will unify. Your cultural expressions will harmonize. Your development will follow established patterns. The insectoid council member clicked. This path guarantees Earth survival. Ambassador, your people will thrive within defined parameters. The jellyfish member rippled. The second path maintains human independence. You will receive knowledge at a pace your species can integrate responsibly. You will develop your own solutions following your evolutionary path. This approach carries risk. Your planet may face continued hardship. Your species may advance in directions incompatible with collective harmony. Susan understood the true test. It wasn't about proving human capabilities. It was about revealing human values. Would she choose guaranteed prosperity at the cost of humanity's essential nature? Or would she choose the harder path that preserved what made humanity unique? Both paths lead to membership in the collective, the crystalline, being concluded, but they represent fundamentally different relationships. Ambassador. As Earth's representative, you must choose. The weight of this decision pressed on Susan. Billions of lives hung in the balance. Immediate solutions would save countless. People end suffering, solve the environmental crisis. But at what cost? Would humans still be human without their diversity, their disagreements, their drive to chart their own course? Susan closed her eyes, thinking of Earth, its countless cultures, languages, arts, and ideas, the chaos and beauty of human existence. The freedom to choose even when choices were difficult. Ambassador. The Council awaits your decision. Susan opened her eyes. When I was selected for this mission, I studied the history of first contact scenarios in human literature. She began. Many imagined advanced aliens offering technological gifts that seemed miraculous. Some stories portrayed this as salvation, others as subtle conquest. The Council members listened silently. Humans fear losing our autonomy as much as we fear extinction. Susan continued. We value our independence, our self-determination, sometimes irrationally stubbornly. But it's fundamental to who we are. She looked at the two projected futures. Neither path is perfect. The first offers solutions we desperately need. The second preserves something we cannot sacrifice. Susan straightened her shoulders. As Earth's representative, I cannot accept prosperity at the cost of human diversity and self-determination. I choose the second path. The council chamber fell silent. The 7 members communicated among themselves in ways Susan could not perceive. Finally, the crystalline being spoke. Ambassador, few species reject immediate benefits for abstract principles. Your decision reveals something significant about human values. The reptilian member added, most choose comfort over challenge, guaranteed outcomes over uncertainty. Your selection conflicts with biological imperatives for survival. Susan felt a need to explain further. Humans have always valued freedom to determine our own fate, even when that path is harder. We believe struggle creates strength, that solving our own problems even with guidance makes us better than having solutions provided. The council members conferred again. Then the crystalline being rose. Ambassador Susan Miller of Earth, we have reached our decision. Susan held her breath, waiting for judgment. Earth is accepted into the collective with provisional status. The terms of our relationship will follow the path you have chosen. Knowledge exchange will proceed at a measured pace. Your world will develop along its own evolutionary trajectory while learning. Collective principles. Relief flooded through Susan. She had secured Earth's membership without sacrificing its essence. The crystalline being continued. Your species presents unique attributes. Ambassador, your contradictions, your adaptability, your valuing of both individual and community. We believe these qualities may contribute perspectives currently absent within the collective. The insectoid member added, your trial performance demonstrates potential. The path will be difficult, but may yield unexpected benefits for both Earth and the collective. Susan bowed deeply. Thank you. Honored. Council Earth welcomes this opportunity. As the council adjourned, Nira and Vala entered the chamber. Vala looked surprised. Ambassador, you selected the more difficult path. Few species make such a choice. Susan smiled. Sometimes the harder path is the right one. Nira approached, her expression unreadable to human perception. The council rarely offers membership to species as young as humanity. Ambassador, your selection influenced their decision. They value your principles even while questioning your methods. Susan felt overwhelmed. The diplomatic mission had succeeded. Earth would join the galactic community on terms that preserved human identity. The challenges ahead remained enormous, but now they would face them with new allies, new knowledge. The return journey to Earth took 7 days, during which Susan prepared for the monumental task ahead, explaining to world leaders the terms she had accepted, the measured pace of technological exchange, the responsibilities of collective membership, the potential and limitations of their new status. Nira spent the journey observing Earth broadcasts, studying human interactions, and asking endless questions. Why do humans create art that evokes sadness? Why do they pursue dangerous activities for pleasure? Why do they form small family units rather than communal groups? Susan found herself defending humanity while also acknowledging its flaws as their ship entered Earth orbit. Susan gazed down at the blue planet with new perspective. From space, the divisions that seemed so important on the surface faded into insignificance. She could see the environmental damage too vast. Swathes of deforestation damaged coastlines. The problems were real, but now there was hope. The ship landed at the International Space Facility built specifically for extraterrestrial contact. A crowd of officials, media, and security personnel waited. Susan straightened her uniform, preparing to face the scrutiny of her own species. Ambassador Miller, welcome. Homestead Director Laura Chen, head of Earth's Contact Initiative. The world awaits your report. Susan descended the ramp. Nira following close behind. The Zentari xenobiologist drew gasps and murmurs from the crowd. Most humans had only seen aliens. In broadcasts, this was direct contact. I bring news from the collective. Susan announced Earth has been granted provisional membership. Director Chen, I present Nira, chief xenobiologist of the Zintari, who will remain as an observer and liaison. The crowd erupted with questions. Security personnel created a path through the throng, leading them to a conference room, where world leaders waited via secure video connection. Susan felt the weight of expectation pressing down. The hope for immediate solutions to Earth's problems for the next 3 hours. Susan explained the trials she had undergone and the choice she had made. She watched faces fall when she described rejecting immediate technological solutions in favor of the longer developmental path. Some leaders nodded with understanding. Others looked openly disappointed. Ambassador Miller said, the representative from Brazil, "Are you telling us you declined technology that could have immediately addressed climate collapse?" Susan met his gaze steadily. "I declined a path that would have compromised human diversity and self-determination. Sir, the collective offered solutions that would have required humanity to conform to their standards." The Chinese representative leaned forward. "We face extinction-level crises. Ambassador was preserving our chaotic individualism worth the cost in human lives." Before Susan could respond, Nira stepped forward. "I request permission to address Earth's leaders." Susan nodded, surprised by the interruption. "Your species faces significant challenges," Nira began, "but immediate solutions often create dependency. The path Ambassador Miller selected preserves something the collective finds valuable: your unique evolutionary trajectory." The Russian president frowned. "What exactly does the collective value about humanity?" "Our resources. Our location." Nira made a gesture with her 4 arms that Susan recognized as emphasis. "Your adaptability, your creativity, your capacity to find unconventional solutions. You approach problems differently than established species. The collective has existed for thousands of your years. Species that join often become similar over time. Humanity offers new perspectives." The room fell silent as leaders considered this. Susan added, "The technology exchange begins immediately with environmental stabilization systems, energy production, and medical advances. The difference is these will be adapted to Earth, not imposed upon us. We will learn the principles and develop our own applications." Gradually, the mood shifted from disappointment to cautious optimism. The American president spoke. "What does the collective expect from Earth in return?" Ambassador Susan had anticipated this question. "The collective expects us to resolve our internal conflicts, to unify our approach to galactic affairs, and eventually to contribute our unique perspectives and innovations. They believe human creativity and adaptability may benefit the broader galactic community." Over the following weeks, Susan worked tirelessly, establishing the framework for technology exchange. The first Zintari scientists arrived, bringing knowledge of environmental restoration techniques adapted for Earth implementation. Nira coordinated their efforts, ensuring the technology transferred respected the developmental path Susan had chosen. 3 months after their return, Susan stood with Nira on the balcony of the newly established Galactic Exchange Center, watching as teams of human and alien scientists collaborated below. They adapt. Quickly, Nira observed human scientists grasp concepts and immediately seek applications beyond our original intent. Susan smiled. "That's humanity for you. We rarely follow instructions exactly." Nira made her chiming laugh. "You defend this trait as positive. Ambassador, the Council would call it concerning." Perhaps Susan admitted, "But it's how we've survived. Our planet has thrown countless challenges at us. We've had to improvise, adapt, find workarounds." They watched as a human engineer demonstrated a modification to a Zintari atmospheric processor, doubling its efficiency. The alien scientists gathered around, curious about the unorthodox approach. "See?" Susan pointed. That engineer saw a possibility the Zintari missed. Not because she's smarter, but because she approached the problem from a different perspective. That's what humanity offers, the collective new ways of seeing. Nira's luminous eyes focused on the interaction. The Council predicted it would take decades for humans to make meaningful contributions. Yet after only 3 months, your species has already begun modifying our technology. Susan felt a surge of pride. That's just the beginning. As the implementation of alien technology progressed, Earth began to heal. Atmospheric scrubbers reduced carbon levels, marine restoration projects revived dying coral reefs, new energy systems replaced polluting alternatives. The changes came gradually but steadily, yet challenges remained. Some nations embraced the new technologies, others resisted, fearing loss of autonomy. Political tensions flared over who would control the knowledge exchange. Humanity's divisions, the very qualities that had concerned the Council, threatened to undermine their progress. 6 months after Earth joined the collective, Susan was summoned to an emergency meeting. Director Chen looked grave. "Ambassador, we have a situation. Brazil has implemented a modified version of the Zintari atmospheric processor without authorization. The modifications exceed safety parameters established by the exchange protocols." Susan felt a chill. The collective monitored Earth's use of their technology. Violations could jeopardize their membership. What happened? Chen activated a display showing satellite imagery of the Amazon region. The Brazilian version processes atmosphere at 5 times the recommended rate. It's effective but creates instability in weather patterns, potentially affecting neighboring countries. Susan turned to Naira, who had become her constant advisor. "How will the Council view this?" Naira's color darkened, a sign Susan had learned indicated concern. "Unauthorized modifications represent exactly what concerned them, Ambassador. The fear that humans would adapt technology without understanding consequences." Susan made a decision. "I need to go to Brazil immediately. See the modification firsthand before we report to the Council." Within hours, Susan and Naira arrived at the Brazilian implementation site. The lead scientist, Dr. Camila Ferreira, greeted them defiantly. "Ambassador Miller, we've tripled rainforest recovery rates. Our modification works." Susan kept her voice level but firm. "Doctor, you've violated exchange protocols, endangered neighboring regions, and potentially jeopardized Earth's standing with the collective." Dr. Ferreira gestured to the recovering rainforest. "Your chosen path was too slow, Ambassador. Too cautious. The forest was dying. We found a solution." Susan studied the modified processor, recognizing both Zintari design and human improvisation. This was exactly what the Council feared: humans taking advanced technology and pushing it beyond established parameters. Yet looking at the data, she couldn't deny the results. The modified processor was regenerating the rainforest at unprecedented rates. If properly managed, the approach could be revolutionary. Susan turned to Naira. "This represents both the problem and promise of humanity. Doesn't it?" Naira examined the equipment. "With supervision, this modification could benefit multiple worlds, Ambassador." "The approach is unconventional but effective." Susan made her decision. "We report this to the Council honestly, but we emphasize the potential benefits. We demonstrate that human innovation, while sometimes reckless, can advance collective knowledge." The report to the Council produced an unexpected result. Instead of sanctions, the Council dispatched a scientific delegation to study the Brazilian modification. The Zintari were simultaneously concerned by the protocol violation and intrigued by the results. 2 weeks later, Susan stood before the Council in a virtual audience, the crystalline being addressed her Ambassador Miller. "This incident demonstrates the unpredictability we anticipated from humanity." Susan nodded respectfully. "Yes. Council member humans will rarely follow established paths precisely. We question, modify, innovate, sometimes unwisely." The jellyfish member rippled. "In this case, the modification shows promise. The approach has applications beyond Earth." The insectoid member added, "Nevertheless, protocol exists for reason, Ambassador. Unregulated adaptation of advanced technology presents dangers."